In September, I had my first ever gotcha day party for Remy. It was a really fun day, and I went all out for my furry guy. It wasn't a huge party, just a handful of people who Remy already knew well. I put photos of Remy around the house, printed Remy stickers, did dog-themed drinks, and even had a craft station inviting guests to make shredding enrichment toys for Remy. There was a Remy trick presentation and even a Remy trivia game, which my good friend Margot won. And of course, Remy got his own gotcha day cake.
Would help Remy blow this out?
Which he proceeded to basically inhale to the horror of all his guests. It was such a fun day, and it was actually the first gotcha day party I've ever had for Remy. Mostly because this was the first year, I really felt good about celebrating him. Things weren't always this great between me and Remy. In fact, it used to be pretty bad. I generally try to keep an upbeat attitude in all my videos about working with a reactive dog like Remy. But in celebration of just how far Remy and I have come, I want to take time in this video to really share just how much we've gone through. Remy's origin story. A chill dog. So I thought. When I first adopted Remy, he seemed absolutely perfect. He was quiet and never barked. He didn't lunge at strangers or other dogs. He appeared to be a calm, relaxed, easygoing dog. He mostly just laid there and slept a lot. I now know that Remy was not himself during those first couple of months. When Remy came into my home, he was totally shut down and spent those first months just decompressing from the stress of the chaotic shelter and his time as a stray. He was all skin and bones when I adopted him, which is why most of his time was spent sleeping, as he regained his strength. It was only after several months, when he had finally fully decompressed, that the real Remy came out, and I did not like what I saw. Remy's transformation into a bad boy. This once silent dog began to bark at literally anything and everything. He would aggressively bark at visitors. He lunged at dogs on walks. And most upsetting of all, he would constantly, and I mean constantly, bite and nip at my arms, legs, and clothing. Before I even reached the coffee maker in the morning, Remy would be tearing holes in my bathrobe and playing tug-of-war with the slippers on my feet. When I sat down to work, he would stare me down with hard eyes, bark loudly and repeatedly in my face, and tear at my pant legs, growling menacingly. When I took him for a walk, he would jump up and bite my arms while grabbing and tearing my shirt or coat. When I would try to relax in the evening and play video games, Remy would continue to bark in my face, nip at me, chew my controllers, tear my sheets and bedding, and steal items off of the coffee table. This would happen constantly, all throughout the day. It was completely overwhelming.
No, Remy.
I will say, even in those early months when I felt so frustrated with Remy, pretty much 24/7, I was never really scared of him. I envisioned him as a kind of jerk teenager taking immense joy in scarring and emotionally torturing me. I knew he wasn't trying to hurt me. It's pretty clear that if he really intended to do damage, he could. But he still managed to leave bruises all over me. And Remy, well, he's not a huge dog, but he's a 50-pound pit bull mix. So not only do his teeth hurt, but having him bark at you and bite at you can be pretty unsettling. On top of those everyday incidents, it wasn't uncommon for Remy to get so over-aroused that he would become triggered into these manic-like episodes that felt considerably more severe than his normal nipping and biting incidents. I often would describe him in this state as being possessed. It felt like a demon would suddenly take over this dog, and he would get the strange, glazed-over look in his eye. When he got into this state, he would growl in a manner I never heard otherwise and bark at me violently. It was really scary. Even when I had full confidence that Remy wasn't going to seriously hurt me, in this state he would often bite me and leave dark purple bruises, and would sometimes break skin as well. To say all this was frustrating would be a huge understatement. I was absolutely heartbroken. Remy's behavior felt like such a tremendous betrayal. Here I was, taking a chance on a rescue dog who needed a home, and he decided to thank me by mercilessly harassing me for what seemed at the time to be his own personal amusement. Now, years later, I understand that Remy's intention was never to make my life miserable. There's a quote I heard somewhere that really made some puzzle pieces fit for me regarding Remy's early behavior. Your dog isn't giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time. At times, it can be really hard to understand why our dogs behave as they do. It can be hard to understand why humans behave as they do, too. I won't ever know for 100% certainty what was going on in Remy's head back then, but it's obvious to me now that he was really, really struggling. Remy's behavior was a result of being completely overwhelmed, confused, and having no idea how to cope in a strange new environment that was unlike any life he knew. While I'll never know Remy's background for sure, based on his behavior and what I now know about animal cognition, I think it's likely that he had very minimal interaction with humans when he was younger, and maybe minimal interaction with anything at all. Remy simply had no idea how to dog. I doubt he had ever spent much time in a home. In fact, I'm pretty confident that most of Remy's terrible behavior was in an effort to simply interact and engage with me. The problem is he had no idea how to ask for my attention. I think it's pretty likely that the only form of attention Remy ever received as a puppy was probably negative attention. I imagine that growing up, Remy learned biting and nipping was how he got attention from people. If he nipped and grabbed someone's clothes, irritating them and making them angry, they would start making noise and, in his mind, play with him. It breaks my heart to think that the vast majority of interactions baby Remy ever had with humans was likely based on frustration, anger, and irritation. In the end, it doesn't help a ton to theorize, but what is now obvious to me is that not only was Remy never socialized, he was horrifically under-socialized to the point of neglect, with very limited or possibly no exposure whatsoever to the outside world. That, coupled with probably some bad genetics involving hypersensitivity and extreme arousal issues, resulted in one incredibly difficult dog that I had zero clue how to handle. He really seemed completely out of control, and I had no idea what to do. Lost and out of my league. With each escalation of Remy's behavior, my spirit sank. I had fallen into a deep hole, and I had no idea how to get out. I abandoned my normal work to spend hours upon hours reading about reactivity, arousal issues, and aggressive behavior. A lot of advice seemed contradictory. Some suggestions seemed to make his behavior even worse. I was walking Remy too much. I was walking him too little. I had to be firmer and be strict about consequences. I had to be gentle, kind, and not frighten him. I should let him sleep with me. I shouldn't let him sleep with me. I need to give him more freedom. I need to give him less freedom. I was trying so hard, but nothing seemed to work. It felt like every week brought a new, richer dimension to my pain. I was failing this dog. I wasn't doing enough. Or maybe I was doing so much that I was insane. I felt like a failure and an idiot. But I also felt like a monster because, honestly, there was a long period where I really hated Remy and had no love in my heart for him. I couldn't stand him. I didn't even want to look at him. He made me feel so sad and angry and frustrated all at once. And with that, I felt immense shame and guilt for hating him because I knew it ultimately wasn't his fault. But then, whose fault was it? I always thought I adored dogs, but I started to wonder if I was wrong. Maybe I didn't like dogs at all. What was wrong with me? What was wrong with him? I began to drink and smoke daily. I cried every day, the most I have since high school. I doubled my antidepressants. I would spend hours playing video games trying to disassociate from my pain. Afraid to leave Remy with roommates in my shared apartment situation in the city, I moved back in with my mother, who was the only one I felt I could ask the favor of watching Remy. Some weekends I would escape to my friend's house to get some mental relief, all the while knowing I'd return to more stories of Remy biting my mother in my absence, adding even more guilt and shame. My low point with Remy was New Year's Eve of 2019, when I went out to celebrate with friends, only to end up sobbing at the bar about Remy. As a friend brought me home, I couldn't stop crying, not just about Remy, but about the person I had become. This sad, miserable person who sucked her friend's energy like a vampire with unending ruminations about her psychotic dog. I've never felt so helpless and trapped in my entire life. I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, and I had no idea what I was going to do, besides to just try to make it through one more day. It was the lowest point of my life, by far. Getting help. Surprise, it doesn't solve everything. The biggest mistake I made was waiting too long to get help. I thought, as the owner of a dog information website like Canine of Mine, And as someone who considers themselves generally very dog savvy, I should be able to figure this out on my own. I think I was also embarrassed about how hard it was. I thought loving this dog should be easy. Making the situation work should be easy. But it wasn't, and I should have gotten help much sooner. When I finally called a professional to come help, it seemed too late. I had waited until I was at my breaking point and had almost no energy left. On the day we had a trainer scheduled to come in for a consultation, my mother was so frustrated with Remy after another terrible walk where he had escaped from his harness, tore her jacket, and bitten her badly once again that she was ready to cancel our trainer visit for that afternoon and get him euthanized immediately. I said I would move out, I would figure it out on my own, but I just couldn't give up. She eventually backed down. That first consultation with a trainer felt like someone had finally thrown me a lifeline. It was a tattered lifesaver that barely managed to stay afloat, but it was something, and I clutched onto it for dear life. Our trainer had suggestions, but also noted that Remy's behavior was pretty severe, explained to us as he barked at her non-stop for the first 20 minutes of our consultation. Over multiple training sessions, and hour-by-hour structured routines, and daily effort, certain parts of Remy's behavior began to improve. But even upon getting help, the situation wasn't magically easy. Some of the trainer's advice was really helpful. Other parts of her instruction made Remy's behavior worse. The trainer I used touted herself as a behavior expert, but I now recognize she was not a certified behavior consultant, something I didn't know was so important with aggression cases. I'll always be thankful for her help at my darkest time, but it's also frustrating to see the areas where I now know I was misled. Even in areas where Remy improved, it was very slow progress. We'd have one day without any incidents, only to have 3 more bites the next day. Improvements were subtle enough to be invisible if you didn't examine his trajectory with a microscope. Not everyone is so lucky. Years later, with continued training effort and management work, Remy and I are in a much better place today. But it is from an extreme position of privilege that we made it here. For a good solid year or more, training Remy was my part-time job. I spent hours upon hours researching reactivity and behavior modification. I consulted with several expensive trainers. I was very lucky that I had the time, money, and the emotional support system needed in order for me to persevere working with Remy. If I had any other kind of job, if I hadn't had friends or family to lean on, if I had young children or other people in my life who needed my attention and care, I could never have kept Remy in my house. Even with all those advantages, the idea of behavioral euthanasia was always lurking in the corners of my mind. I knew I couldn't inflict this dog on anyone else. I knew there wasn't an alternative home for Remy. It was me or nothing. I only was able to persevere with Remy because I had so much support and because it felt like I didn't really have any other option. I knew that I wouldn't be able to continue with Canine of Mine if I needed to put Remy down. I knew my heart would split, and I was afraid of what kind of new person that might make me. But after my early experience with Remy, I've never, ever judged anyone for considering behavioral euthanasia. It's an agonizing choice, but I recognize Remy would have been impossible for 99% of most people to handle. It got better, but never easy. For a long time, I was convinced that if I put in enough effort and hard work, Remy would transform into a good dog. That was part of what broke me when things were at rock bottom, working so hard and not being able to reach the goal I had set for myself and Remy, mostly due to the fact that it wasn't a realistic goal. Even after our most difficult year together, there used to still be many days where I felt so frustrated with Remy. I felt frustrated that we'd work so hard each and every day on reactivity behavior training and management with only small, slow improvements. I felt frustrated that even with all our loose leash walking practice, there would still be times when Remy would tug on the leash. I felt frustrated that bringing home contractors or guests was still a stressful ordeal. While some of those feelings are still there, I feel a lot more accepting of Remy these days. And a lot of our successful cohabitation has more to do with my perspective change than Remy's transformation into Mr. Perfect Angel Boy. Remy's behavior issues have become more quirks to me now than problems that need to be solved. Part of it is I've learned to understand him better and understand why he behaves as he does. When Remy yanks forward to go towards an alluring smell, it's not to test his power or challenge me. It's because he's a very sensitive, very easily aroused dog. Smells are extremely stimulating for him. When he barks at guests, it's because he has big feelings and doesn't really know what to do with them. He's excited, nervous, and conflicted all at once. To be clear, Remy has made huge improvements since when I first adopted him. Friends, family members, and trainers alike note that he is a visibly calmer, more well-adjusted and better behaved dog. But he's not perfect. He's not easy. And he probably never will be. I see him trying. I feel so thankful that I've learned to love Remy for the very special guy that he is. It would probably still be easy for me to get down on Remy's less than perfect behavior were it not for my close inner circle of friends who have come to see, know, and love Remy too. They are the ones who call out his progress and remind me to celebrate his wins, however small. And I've seen how hard Remy tries to be a good boy. When a visiting friend gets a little too rough playing with him and Remy starts to go over a threshold, I've seen Remy himself choose to grab a toy to redirect to. And those are some of my proudest moments and proof of just how far he has come. Remy is not a normal dog. He never will be. When Remy's issues first started to crop up, I was confident that I could fix them. If I just worked hard enough and put in the effort, he would change. And he did change, a lot. But he's never going to become the dog I used to dream of. It's a humbling experience to put your heart and soul into an effort, to give 100%, only to find it's just not enough. I thought if I wanted it hard enough, Remy would be a different dog. But Remy is just built different. He's not the kind of dog you see sitting beside giggling children at festivals. He's not the kind of dog you take to an outdoor patio or to a dog park. He's not the kind of dog where I open my front door and say, "Oh, and this is Remy," and walk away to let the chips fall where they may. Even now, after all this time, there are days where I mourn what I don't have, where I just wish it was easier. And part of the reason why this year I focused more on management than behavior modification is because I'm just tired. I'm ready to have other things going on in my life besides Remy. It's not easy having a reactive, ultra-sensitive dog in my life. But Remy and his imperfections have taught me so much about how to exercise empathy, how to understand another person's perspective, which can be both easier and more challenging with a different species, and how to see the good traits in someone even when they make your life difficult at times. All this is just to say, if you're going through a tough time with your dog, where you feel totally overwhelmed and at your wit's end with no idea what to do, you're not alone. A lot more people struggle with their dogs than you might realize. And if you decide it's just too much for you to handle, that is completely okay. Do not feel ashamed or embarrassed. You have a right to live a life that is not completely consumed by a problem dog. It's definitely not the right path for everyone. But if you feel up for putting in serious effort, consulting with trainers, and building your empathy powers, I promise it will not always feel this hard. I can't promise things will be perfect, but it can get a lot better. Remy is definitely a testament to that. I absolutely adore this dog, issues and all. And despite all our ups and downs, I can really say that I just can't imagine my life without him. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It honestly took me forever to make this. I've been meaning to make this video for so long, but I spent a lot of time on it because it's a really important video for me and it means a lot, and I really wanted to share my experience with Remy. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.